Knight, pledged loyalty to their lord, excel in advanced swordsmanship, and skilled in combat. Ninja, known for their exceptional abilities, mastery of various tools, and expertise in stealthy operations. In this era full of war, these two entities, namely knights and ninjas, were never supposed to meet, because they themselves have vast differences in terms of fighting style, culture, speaking style, behavior, and many other things. But for young female knight, it seemed like such a thing didn't seem to exist. As it was now, she never imagined that they would already be her side. Today this man, a knight, is the leader of the third squad of the Sun Kingdom Knights, who will carry out a mission in this place. This man and his troops are preparing for a medium-scale battle. Then their mission is the subjugation of monsters in this dungeon, which will soon begin. This young woman is a knight, and is one of the troops who will take part in the monsters subjugation mission. Her name is Komi Sarah. She in charge of training the third squad rookies. It was seen that two rookie knights seemed to be looking for another rookie who had not yet been seen on this mission, and they thought that Sarah was not strict enough in training him in terms of discipline. But it seemed that was not the case. It turned out that what they had been looking for was already in front of them, a knight who looked shy and lazy. He was also playing with something in his hand. The two of them who saw this man suddenly in front of them were suddenly shocked, because previously he had not been visible in front of them, and now he appeared with an eve of presence that was not felt at all. They call him NATO. For them, NATO is always sneaky as usual, and he was almost invisible before. And they also asked where NATO was before when the captain was talking about preparations for this mission. But in his usual tone and innocence, accompanied by his lazy face, he only answered that previously he was only playing new puzzle games. This rookie with an annoyed face thinks NATO is an introvert, and he's been doing this for 6 months since he joined. Then the other rookie also seemed annoyed by what NATO was doing and his nonchalant attitude. This rookie also tried to disturb him with his feet, but NATO immediately wriggling as if he didn't care about what he was doing. His name is NATO. He comes from a rare island nation called Japangu in the east, until he finally was able to be here because previously, he barely passed the entrance test with a marginal score. He also was kind of an introverted guy and quirky rookie. Suddenly when they looked away a little, NATO suddenly disappeared, then was no longer visible in front of them, and they were confused by that. It turned out that NATO was behind Sarah to be under the protection and avoid interference from the two of them. She was also curious by his very antisocial attitude. For them, NATO won't care if they continue to bully him, and they also seem to think that bullying him is useless, because NATO is just a weak person and has an annoying past. Finally, after making preparations and arranging plans, they went into the cave for the subjugation of dungeon monsters mission. The knights began to enter the place. They walked through a long corridor, while looking around the surroundings. All this was done in order to minimize surprise attacks that occurred, so that they could prevent a surprise attack from occurring. There can see that NATO is also paying attention to his surroundings. When he entered this place, it seemed like he still hadn't seen any dangerous movements that would appear. So for now he had to remain alert and widen his field of vision. On the other side, Sarah seems worried about NATO's condition, because lately he always gets the task of exploring dungeons, but he seems to be fine with that. Sarah also doesn't like NATO's character. When she talks to him, his gaze is always in another direction, and that made her a little annoyed. Finally, after passing through a long hallway in the dungeon, they began to enter the underground dungeon. Then the knights also began to observe this area, as saying when exploring the previous hallway in order to minimize danger. While traveling through the dungeon, NATO noticed something was wrong on this floor. It seemed he knew that the dangerous thing was some kind of trap or other detrimental thing. It looks like they are walking carefully in that place. NATO always pays attention to the floor, and the other rookies always pay attention to their surroundings. But this rookie doesn't pay attention to the area of the floor. Until finally, NATO found out that the rookie behind him wasn't paying attention to the situation on the dungeon floor, and he was too late to tell him about it. Because the rookie didn't pay attention to what was underneath him. He accidentally stepped on a strange floor. It looked like the floor was pressed when he stepped on it. He was confused about what he had stepped on, and why when he stepped on this floor it felt like pressed. Suddenly something unexpected happened. When the rookie stepped on a strange floor, the wall behind him appeared from below, and blocked their way out of the dungeon, but can see from Nato's face that this didn't surprise him, as if he already knew what was going to happen. They were both shocked when they saw this, and Sarah tried to understand whether it was a trap. Then that captain blamed the rookie for being reckless with what he did. But this rookie actually blamed Nato, because this rookie only followed Nato's steps when walking straight forward, even though they were both stepping on the same floor. He also admitted his mistake and apologized for this, because Nato's walking style has its unique. They were confused about what was happening, with a wall suddenly appearing in front of them. Then the captain told the troops to remain alert for what was going to happen, but there was more than one large shadow right behind the knights. Slowly, they began to look behind them to see what the big shadow actually was. It turned out that the large shadows behind them were 4 large monsters, each of which was carrying a large log weapon. It could be seen that the knights were starting to panic at the presence of these 4 large monsters. They are big, have bald heads and stumpy faces, and look stupid. There is no mistaking these monsters as trolls. They were confused and panicked about how it was possible that in this not too big dungeon there were 4 large trolls. Then middle in this panic, the captain convinced his troops to remain calm and not panic. They took out their weapons to prepare to fight. The knights began to carry out their plan. With this large monster, they didn't want to take the risk of attacking up close, but by attacking with sword skills from afar, they immediately attacked with a burst wave. Unexpectedly, their burst wave attack, which was carried out at the same time, did not work at all on the troll. Those who saw that the attack from afar did not work on the troll began to panic and become confused. Because their attacks didn't work, the trolls began to advance in preparation to attack the knights using large logs. The attack carried out by the 2 trolls using a large log was very strong, causing the knights in front of them to lose instantly when hit by the attack, and the effect of the attack was area-specific. It was really a great attack because the knights lost instantly, even though the attack was only launched by 2 trolls, and the destructive power caused by the trolls' attack was also large. Could see the damage in the area? It seemed that only Sarah was left. She was scared at the moment because her opponents were very strong, and they all lost quickly. Sarah concluded that the trolls were not carrying out ordinary attacks, but they were attacking with magic blows so that the attack power released was so great. It looks like Nato is also unconscious as a result of the attack, and Sarah is currently also suffering from injuries from the attack, so she can't move now. The trolls started to approach Sarah to attack, and now she was injured, so she couldn't run and her comrades had lost in one attack. But for Sarah, even if the knights were still not defeated and fought with full strength against the trolls, it would still be impossible for them to defeat the trolls. With a strong fighting determination, she will continue to fight. She will bet everything on the one attack she will soon launch. When the energy for the attack has been gathered, Sarah uses her sword to try to attack the trolls, using a technique called line slash. These trolls seemed shocked by the attack that would soon come their way. The line slash sword technique is a technique that resembles a burst wave, but this technique is the strongest version, apart from the large slashing scale. And of course, its destructive power is also large. But there is a weakness in this technique, namely the slashing speed is so slow that it makes the trolls who even have large bodies easily avoid the attack. Sarah, who saw that her attack could be easily avoided by the trolls, was very shocked, and she was still confused as to why this could happen. And finally, her slashing only hit the dungeon wall. This troll also knew that the attack that Sarah carried out was a magic attack. For them, it would be dangerous if they were hit by an attack like that. Now Sarah has completely run out of energy because after using the line slash skill, she didn't expect that her attack could be jumped by these big monsters, and thought that they were not ordinary monsters. It turned out that Nato had not completely lost consciousness, and Sarah told him to run away. She had indeed run out of magic, but she could still use sword techniques for a few minutes, holding Nato back to find a way out of this place. Nato could only remain silent hearing her words, and Sarah, with remaining strength, would carry out the final battle against the trolls. Suddenly Nato took out a small object from his hand, and inserted a needle into the small object right in the middle. Then he used the object by blowing to remove it. It turned out that the object was a weapon like a shooter that was used in the mouth. He shot the needle right behind Sarah's neck, until she was shocked by what happened, and it felt like she had been stung by a bee. It wasn't an ordinary needle, but could see from the look on her face that she seemed to have been affected by something when the needle hit the back of her neck. Finally, as a result of this, Sarah fell. Nato finally got up. It turned out that all this time he had only been pretending to be injured. Then that the needle contained poison that he made from the start. And now Sarah won't wake up for a while. Nato has gotten up and looks like he has no injuries at all. Then his body is still fit. Now he has no choice but to finish off the trolls. The trolls also looked confused, even though previously they were sure that there are no more knights still surviving. But in fact, there was still someone who was still alive and not injured. For Nato, he finally did this because he didn't want Sarah to end up in a place like this, and she was a good person. He also didn't believe that this army of knights could be defeated so quickly by them. Seeing him talk too much seemed to make the trolls sick, and they attacked Nato at the same time. It looked like Sarah could still survive, and now she seemed numb and couldn't move anything. When she looked ahead, there was Nato who was walking towards the front alone. It turned out that Nato was walking towards the rampaging trolls alone, and that made Sarah worried. When the trolls attacked him at the same time, Nato suddenly disappeared in front of them. He quickly seemed to dodge all the attacks. These trolls were confused about what happened to the man, and where exactly he was now. How shocked Sarah was by what she saw. It turned out that Nato was right behind the troll. How could he be in a place like that? And his whereabouts were still unknown to the trolls. It seems that Sarah is now not worried about Nato's condition. She is just confused because why is he still there doing nothing? While the trolls were confused about his existence, Nato was seen to be very relaxed when he was near the trolls and was playing around a little. He continued playing around there. And what made her wonder was why the trolls still couldn't feel his existence. Nato also seems to enjoy this when he is near the trolls. That trolls are still confused about Nato's existence, while Sarah seems annoyed by what he did. She's annoyed because he's just playing around, not doing anything. These trolls thought he was carrying out a tactic, and told him to get out immediately. Finally, Nato, after playing around a bit, immediately took out his sword to attack. He would attack using concealment techniques, and use a combination of attacks for the final result. Two trolls in front of him were immediately slashed with force by Nato without any mercy. His attack was on such a large scale that he was able to defeat two trolls at once. Then the other three remaining trolls were also immediately finished off by Nato using the line slash skill, the same skill used by Sarah, a technique that can defeat the enemy in one large-scale attack. The trolls were confused about what happened to them and why they could lose all at once. Sarah, who saw Nato's true abilities, was very surprised, even though she had always been with him. So she knew how far Nato had progressed, but right now he was different from the usual Nato. It looks like he can defeat all the trolls without any difficulty, and he defeats all the trolls in one attack with a line slash. Nato seems to have mastered the magic sword technique a long time ago, and only now is he using it to fight all the trolls, and even then he is forced to do so. For him, the technical power of the knight is very great. As a ninja, he cannot match this power attack. He can conclude this because in the last half year, he realized that the depth of swordsmanship and the special technique that utilize magical power are truly wonderful. That now he was confused whether he should wait for Sarah to wake up first or not, then search a good reason when this troll was defeated, so as not to involve him. It looks like Nato will return to pretending to be unconscious again, and describes the defeat of the troll as the work of Sarah, who used a line slash to defeat the troll. He started looking at Sarah, whether she was conscious or not. It turns out that all this time she was aware and didn't faint. Then she asked what made her suspicious, who Nato really was. A very shocked expression appeared on Nato's face. He couldn't say anything, and she must have seen Nato with what he did to all the trolls. He looked confused and asked Sarah how she couldn't faint when she was poisoned. She knows that the one who poisoned her was Nato. Then Sarah says that in the past, she could endure poison from many monsters of time and have developed a resistance to it, just like a gorilla. It turned out that Nato's suspicions were correct. Sarah knew everything that Nato was doing, such as being behind the troll without being noticed and playing around there. He was very surprised that she had seen everything, and he reasoned that because he was using a concealment technique, his presence could not be noticed by the trolls. In the end, Nato could only surrender, because this was the first time someone could see the movement of his concealment technique. He also admitted that he was a jounin. Nato admitted that Sarah was not an ordinary person, because she was the only person who could see the movement of his concealment technique. He also asked about Nato's statement about being a jounin, which meant that he was a ninja, and Sarah also received news that there was a spy from Japangu. It's true that Nato is a jounin in his village. Among the jounin, he is the most outstanding, but she doesn't question things about jounin. Sarah thought that Nato was a spy who joined the night squad. She also didn't think that he had been training him in swordsmanship for 6 months. That's ridiculous. Now Sarah suspects that when Nato will finish her off. For him, because someone already knew his identity, then eliminating might be the right choice to complete his secret mission. Referred to righteous heart. Ninjas undergo mental training that justifies any inhumane act if it serves their lord. It's to prevent themselves from breaking. Don't take it the wrong way. Hearing what Nato said, Sarah seemed angry and started preparing to hold the sword to do a counterblow. But at the moment, he didn't think at all about finishing off Sarah and would refrain from doing so. Hearing what Nato said, he was shocked. Sarah was confused as to why he didn't do it. He tried to think of something. Nato began to explain the reason, because for 6 months, Sarah always found various ways to teach him as a knight, and she had been very kind to Nato all this time. Then after that she always found him wherever Nato was, from trees or rooftops. Even though all this time he had continued to train hard to ensure that no one found him, who would have thought that the only one to find him through his concealment technique was Sarah? Having lived in the shadows all this time, he felt for the first time that his existence was acknowledged. Though it goes against the righteous heart, he didn't want to finish Sarah. For Nato, that means he has failed as a ninja, and that's embarrassing. Then Sarah asks him, what will Nato do now? He began to explain to Sarah about what he would do now. If there is a way to carry out mission while keeping Sarah-san alive, and there are 2 options.
The first choice is to be captured on the orders of a knight, or drink a moralization drug which has the effect of losing memory and becoming brain dead. A drug made from opium raised inside the ninja village. The content in it can also trigger stupidity. After hearing Nato's explanation, Sarah seemed to really disapprove of using the drug and refused to take it. It wasn't long before her condition, still a little numb, started to get up. Sarah, in a numb condition, tried to get up and raise her sword. Because of his previous words, she still didn't trust Nato, then invited him to fight with herself as a knight who would fight to the end, protect everyone. But Nato tried to make things clear that he wouldn't possibly do that to her, because his main mission right now is to retrieve a rolled paper called Bansenshuki. Sarah, who heard this, was confused about the Bansenshuki, and he explained that it was a high-level jutsu that was in the scripture. A jutsu that no human would be able to use. A year ago, a genius Jinjutsu ninja, a former jounin, escaped and became Fugitive ninja. He took the sacred scripture with him. So Sarah began to realize that's why Nato infiltrated the Night Order. Nato confirmed this and began to tell Sarah the truth, that according to the information they got, Commander Ifuru is currently trying to possess Bansenshukai. Hearing the name of Commander Ifuru, Sarah was very shocked. She was confused about why Commander Ifuru did that. To Nato it seemed Commander Ifuru was planning something bad with that forbidden jutsu. After that, Nato guessed that she had been exploring dungeons a lot lately, and Sarah confirmed this, that currently there was no war going on in certain areas. So for them, this was the right time to exterminate monsters. But Nato immediately denied Sarah's statement that their goal recently in exploring many dungeons was for treasure. They are looking for existence of the Bansenshukai. He told her that Kashin Kojin was a genius Jinjutsu user, and he was usually called a magician. Maybe this dungeon even had something to do with that person. Then Sarah was shocked to hear that. Now he want to find Bansenshukai before Commander Ifuru, but now he is already to get it. Then Nato now trying to steal it. Sarah thinks that all this time, she has been assigned to explore many dungeons to look for treasures related to Bansenshukai. Hearing what Nato said, it seemed Sarah began to believe it, and they began to make an agreement that Sarah would not spread this secret to everyone, with the reply that Nato would continue to work as a ninja and knight at this time. As long as it doesn't put the kingdom in danger and Nato saves herself before, in the name of a knight, Sarah will not reveal Nato's secret to the public. It wasn't long till Nato believed her, because for him Sarah had high self-esteem as a knight. So now they try to complete this mission together, and entrust it to Sarah. She tried not to get chummy, she just took advantage, and showed determination. But with sincere feelings, she thanked Nato for saving her life. He started to disappear from sight. Nato checked all the knights, that they were only fainted, and did not require further treatment. Sarah was relieved to hear this. He disappeared from sight again. He began to check the door trapping them, that it would not be able to be destroyed. They have no choice but to find for the treasure in the deepest dungeon. If they find and open the treasure, the trap will be disabled. Nato confirmed this, that the only way is to keep moving forward. This is the same as to defeat two birds with one stone, meaning it is a gamble if find a Bansashukai, so don't get hopes up. The two of them began to explore deeper into the dungeon. While traveling, Sarah was curious about how Nato did his yang style technique. Then Nato told her that it was not a yang style but a shadow walk technique, like a floating step, side running, fox running, and rabbit walk techniques for hiding the presence of the body from view, such as hiding raccoon, fox, quail, and cannon. Eliminate body odor and bad breath diet, then combining them will make the presence disappear. He will also practice this. Make existence disappear by spreading a layer of spiritual power entire the body, like as applying a thin layer of oil to the whole body. Spiritual power, which means magic power, and Sarah asked about ninjas who mastered many techniques, and even that was true. Normal people would not be able to control magic power with that level of difficulty. Sarah was very interested in ninjas, so she was curious about how strong knights and ninjas would be if they fought. For Nato, it was clear that the knight would be much stronger by a long shot, and she was a little confused by this. The fact is that ninjas don't have good attacking abilities, so a ninja only relies on tools to escape, but it seems like Sarah doesn't want to hear an explanation like that because it's still too difficult to understand. The ninja's job is intelligence, strategy, and assassination. The goal is not to fight, but to go unnoticed. If a fight occurs, then on Japanga Island there are samurai who are experts in fighting. Sarah, who heard this, immediately thought about Nato while practicing. That he managed to master the sword technique in 6 months. This was very unique and rarely done by knights during this time. A ninja who was only skilled at hiding himself. Then if he combined the sword attack power of a knight, then an unexpectedly great power would emerge. Then he can be called a ninja knight. Then they started walking again, and now there were many fork roads. There are many fork roads there, but Nato seems to know which is the right way and immediately shows it to Sarah. She looks confused as to why Nato knows which way to go. It looked like he was pointing the wrong way, because the road was a dead end, and that wasn't good for them. Then Sarah told Nato to immediately look for another way, but he was still there checking the layers of the wall. When he checked it, Nato knew that this was the right way. Sarah, who heard this, was confused, even though it was clear that there was no other way here. Then he told Sarah to immediately move away from the wall, looking like he was set something around the wall. Suddenly a large explosion occurred, causing the wall to be destroyed instantly. Sarah looked very shocked by the explosion. Sarah was confused and asked Nato this. Why did the wall explode? Did he use magic? He didn't use any magic power. Then Nato immediately showed something to Sarah. He shows off his ninja tool, which looks like a bomb called Hurokuhia. He also explained that this was a bomb that caused an explosion, and that it contained gunpowder. Sarah was confused about gunpowder. Nato understood that Sarah wouldn't know about that, because he knew that there was no gunpowder on the mainland, and gunpowder was only a small island called Japangu. Sarah was annoyed when she heard that statement. It's true what NATO said, that this is the right way. Can see there is an empty room behind the wall. Sarah was amazed when she found out this truth, and she was also amazed that NATO was able to find out this quickly. For him, this was easy because the wall layer was thin, and he also suspected that someone had deliberately built a wall to cover this road. They started to enter the room, looking annoyed because previously NATO said there were no offensive techniques in ninja. That's true, so he used a bomb ninja tool to blow it up. When they entered the room, she was immediately shocked by what she saw. It turned out that in the room, there was a large dragon, which seemed to be guarding the place. The dragon turned out to be able to talk, and the dragon admired their skills to get to this place. Sarah was really surprised that she would find a dragon in this place. It looked like she was scared because this was the first time she met a dragon. NATO suspected from the start that he had smelled a bad smell when he first entered this dungeon, and Sarah was confused that just by the smell, he could feel the danger. NATO tells Sarah to step back, because he will face the dragon directly. Sarah also looked surprised that NATO would fight the dragon directly, because so far no human has been able to fight a dragon alone. Plus, she wouldn't be able to help him, because she currently still couldn't use magic skills, but for him it didn't matter and told her to stay away. Sarah immediately suspected that NATO had previously defeated the dragon. He immediately rejected this, and this was the first time he had met a dragon, but before that he had fight spirits like the monsters on Japangu Island. Then the demon spirits were defeated by the samurai on the island. Suddenly the dragon immediately launched a fireball attack. The dragon immediately spewed fire at them. The explosion caused by the attack was very large, and when the attack took place, NATO managed to protect Sarah to avoid the attack. They dodged outside the wall, but saw that the attack made the wall melt. He was shocked to see the strong attack made by the dragon. Then Sarah planned to retreat first, then come up with a good plan. NATO suddenly disappeared quickly in front of Sarah, and this made her confused about where he was. Then she realized something, as if she already knew where NATO was. Then she immediately looked back. The unexpected thing happened. It turned out that NATO was already near the dragon. He used his ninja skills so that his existence would not be known, and Sarah, who saw him, couldn't say anything. It looks like he really enjoys his every existence without being known by the enemy. Sarah, who saw NATO, tried not to laugh, because it wasn't the right thing to do at this time. Because the dragon didn't know about his existence, it didn't take long. NATO immediately used the lion/sword technique. This was what she wanted to see, a combination of attacks between hide ninja techniques and lion/knights. But what was really surprising, NATO's powerful lion/attack still couldn't seem to hurt the dragon. Sarah was also confused as to why the powerful lion/attack had no effect on the dragon. Maybe because the dragon's skin was so hard, the attack didn't work. Suddenly the dragon counterattacked, slashing its tail at NATO. It can be seen that NATO managed to dodge the continuous attacks from the dragon's tail easily without experiencing any difficulty at all. He immediately stepped back because he didn't expect it. It turned out that this was 8 times more difficult than he expected, but for Sarah, that was not the attitude should be shown at this time when facing the dragon, which meant they were in danger. NATO didn't mind this incident, and told Sarah to play a puzzle. She was angry when offered this puzzle at her such a critical time. It looks like NATO already has a plan to face the dragon. He immediately launched his sword technique Burst Wave, an attack that was weak compared to Lion Slash. His attack didn't hit the dragon, but right under the dragon's feet. It was seen that an explosion occurred right at the dragon. A large explosion occurred at the dragon, forcing them to take cover from the blast. Sarah was very surprised how a weak attack could result in such a large explosion. He immediately asked NATO why the explosion could occur only with a burst wave. He immediately showed it to Sarah. It looked like a nothing special board. This is a ninja tool called Uzumabi, a tool that can make the user run away from enemies. By inserting a needle to cause an explosion, he planted the needle while dodging the attack from the dragon's tail earlier. When the needle was stuck, Nato just had to trigger the needle with a burst wave, so that an explosion could occur, and Sarah, who heard the combination of attacks between ninjas and knights, were very amazed. Suddenly, he disappeared again in front of her. Now the hard skin that protected the dragon was destroyed, and now the dragon no longer had hard skin. The dragon looked confused about where his opponent was now. It turned out that Nato was right in front of the dragon. Nato immediately attacked the dragon, which no longer had hard skin, with a lion slash. Nato finally won the fight, with his clever strategy, then combination of ninja and knight attacks. Sarah, who saw Nato defeat the dragon alone, was very surprised, because normally it takes a party to defeat the dragon. Sarah thinks that Danzo Nato is an unpredictable person and also has great abilities. After the fight, he saw there was treasure there. This treasure is protected by a dragon, and Sarah suspects that it is a Bansen Shuki. But Nato refused because the presence of Kashin Kojin could not be detected in this dungeon. She offered to open the chest with a sword. It looks like Nato wants to open the chest with his own hands, but Sarah is not sure because the chest cannot be opened with his bare hands. It turned out that the chest was successfully opened. Nato opened it with a ninja tool called Kororakaji. For him, even children in his village could use this tool. Sarah, who heard this, felt annoyed and told Nato not to tell about his village anymore.